She was 9 months pregnant. 9 months. And the Roman Empire just told her she had to travel 90 miles. Not a suggestion, not a request. An imperial decree. Caesar Augustus. A census of the entire known world. Every man to return to his ancestral city and register. Failure to comply was not an option in a province already watched by soldiers and governed by fear. Joseph's line ran through Bethlehem, 90 miles south, through the hill country, on roads built for armies, not for pregnant women in their third trimester. She went. The Christmas story has been told so many times that we have stopped feeling the weight of that sentence. She went. 2 words. 8 to 10 days. A body in its final weeks of pregnancy. A road that did not care. Nobody talks about that journey. What it cost her physically. What she was thinking mile by mile. What it felt like to arrive. We are stepping onto that road right now. Before you can feel what Mary endured, you have to understand what made the journey non-negotiable. The census of Caesar Augustus is a historical event. Roman censuses were used for 2 purposes: taxation and military conscription. They were enforced through the provincial bureaucracy and, where necessary, through the soldiers stationed throughout Judea. Non-compliance was not met with leniency. It was met with fines, property seizure, or arrest. Herod the Great ruled Judea as a client king under Roman authority. He had his own reasons to ensure the census went smoothly. Roman favor was the only thing keeping him in power. The local infrastructure would have actively enforced compliance. Joseph had no alternative. He was a man of the house of David. Bethlehem was the city of David. The decree required him there. And Mary, 9 months pregnant, days from delivery, in a world where a woman did not travel alone, had to go with him or be left alone in Nazareth without her husband during a delivery that could kill her. Neither option was good. The road was dangerous. Staying behind was dangerous. She chose the road. That is not a passive choice. That is a woman calculating risk in a world that gives women very few options, and choosing the one that keeps her family together. 90 miles. Let's make that real. The route from Nazareth to Bethlehem ran approximately 90 to 100 miles, depending on the path taken. Most Jewish travelers avoided the direct route through Samaria for cultural and safety reasons, and took the longer Jordan Valley Road. South through the valley, then west up into the Judean hill country toward Bethlehem. Walking pace for a healthy adult in the ancient world was roughly 20 miles per day. For a caravan, slower. For a pregnant woman in her 9th month, significantly slower. Most scholars estimate the journey took 8 to 10 days. 8 to 10 days. The roads were Roman military roads, hard-packed stone in the better sections, rutted dirt tracks in others. They were built for troop movement, not for comfort. There were no inns at reliable intervals. Travelers camped or found hospitality in villages along the route. Water had to be carried or found. Food had to be managed carefully. The Jordan Valley section drops well below sea level. In December, which is when Passover period timing would place the journey, though scholars debate the exact season, the valley could be cold at night and warm during the day. Temperature swings of 30 degrees between midday and midnight were not unusual. She walked through all of it, or rode a donkey through all of it, if they were fortunate enough to have one. The nativity tradition shows a donkey, but Luke doesn't mention one. We don't know. What we know is she covered that distance, in that body, in those conditions. Set aside the theology for a moment. Just think about the body. In the final weeks of pregnancy, The baby has descended. The pressure on the pelvis is constant. Walking, any walking, becomes a deliberate, careful, physically demanding act. The center of gravity has shifted so far forward that every step requires conscious balance. The lower back aches without stopping. The feet swell. The ankles swell. Braxton Hicks contractions, practice contractions that the body uses to prepare for labor, are frequent in the third trimester. They are not painful in the way labor contractions are, but they are unmistakable. They stop you. They require you to breathe through them and wait and then continue. Mary would have had them on the road, stopping, breathing, continuing. She had no way to know if what she was feeling was a practice contraction or the beginning of labor. In a first pregnancy, the distinction is not always obvious. Every contraction on that road was a question she had to answer with her body before she could keep walking. She was also dehydrated, almost certainly. Water on a first-century road was not reliably clean. A pregnant woman's fluid needs are higher than normal. Heat, exertion, and limited water access would have combined to produce the particular exhaustion that dehydration creates. Heavier than tiredness, slower than sickness. She walked anyway. Not because she had trained for this, not because she was exceptional in her physical endurance, but because the road was the road, and Bethlehem was at the end of it, and there was no version of this story where she stayed home, mile by mile. What was she carrying in her mind? She had been carrying Gabriel's words for 9 months. The Son of the Most High, the throne of David his father, a kingdom with no end. She had spoken the Magnificat in Elizabeth's house. Fierce, certain, declaratory. She had watched Elizabeth's impossible baby grow and be born and be named John in defiance of everyone's expectation. She believed. She had always believed. The yes she had spoken to Gabriel had not wavered. But belief and physical exhaustion are not mutually exclusive. You can trust God completely and still feel every mile in your feet. You can be certain of the promise and still wonder, on the 4th day of a 9-day walk, whether you are going to make it to Bethlehem before the baby decides to come on a roadside in the Jordan Valley. She was thinking about where she would deliver. She was thinking about whether there would be a midwife in Bethlehem. She was thinking about the women she knew back in Nazareth who had delivered safely and the ones who hadn't. She was thinking about what Simeon had said over her son in the temple. A sword will pierce your own soul. And what that meant, and whether this journey was the beginning of the piercing or something else entirely. She was thinking the way a mother thinks, practically and theologically at the same time, praying the Psalms and watching the road for loose stones in the same breath. She was also probably talking to the baby. Women in labor talk to their babies. Women in the final weeks of pregnancy talk to their babies. She would have, in Aramaic, quietly. The same prayers she planned to whisper over his cradle already being whispered on the road before he arrived. They arrived. Luke 2:6-7. While they were there, the days were completed for her to give birth. The Greek phrasing suggests they had been in Bethlehem for some time before the birth. Not that she went into labor the moment they arrived. They had time to try to find accommodation, time to discover that there was no room in the inn. The word Luke uses, kataluma, has been much debated. It likely refers to a guest room in a private home rather than a commercial inn. Extended family was in Bethlehem for the same census. The house of David had not forgotten Bethlehem. But the house was full. Every guest room was taken. Every relative who had arrived before them had already claimed the space. Joseph and Mary were offered the lower room, the space where the animals slept. In a typical first-century Galilean-style home, the lower level sheltered the family's animals at night: sheep, a donkey, perhaps a cow. The family slept in the upper room. The lower room was warmer than the outside, sheltered from wind, dry enough. Not ideal for a delivery, but shelter. She had walked 90 miles. She had arrived in a crowded city where she knew no one. She had been offered the room with the animals, and she lay down in it and prepared to deliver her son. The distance between what Gabriel had promised and what this looked like was not lost on her. She had been living in that distance for 9 months. She was still trusting the same God who had asked for her yes to handle the part she couldn't see. There is something the journey did that nothing else could have done. It stripped everything away. By the time Mary arrived in Bethlehem, she had no illusions left about comfort. She had no expectation of ideal conditions. She had walked 90 miles pregnant and arrived in a borrowed animal shelter, and she was still there, still present, still trusting. The road had taken everything that wasn't essential and left only what was. Her faith, her body, Joseph beside her, the child about to arrive. The theologians call this kenosis, the emptying that precedes the filling. Mary had been emptied by the road. Everything she might have expected, every vision of how this should go, had been walked out of her mile by mile. What remained was the bedrock of a trust that had been tested and held. She was ready, not because she had prepared for these specific conditions, but because the road had prepared her for conditions she couldn't have anticipated. Because 9 days of choosing to keep walking when stopping would have been easier had built in her something that a comfortable journey never could have. The Son of God was about to be born, and his mother was ready because of the 90 miles, not in spite of them. He walked beside her for every one of those miles. Joseph does not speak a single word in all of Scripture, not one recorded sentence. But Matthew's Gospel shows us his character in 3 decisions: divorcing quietly instead of publicly, obeying the angel immediately, fleeing to Egypt without hesitation. On this road, his character showed in something quieter than a decision. He stayed beside her. He adjusted his pace to hers. He found the water. He negotiated the stopping places. He managed the practical details of a 9-day journey with a wife who could go into labor at any moment and no midwife available. Every time she stopped for a contraction, he stopped. Every time she needed to rest in the shade, he waited. Every mile that took longer than the last, he did not push her. He matched her. That is not nothing. That is the specific love that shows up in inconvenient circumstances and does not make the inconvenience about itself. That is a just man, the word Matthew uses for him, dikaios, being just in the way that actually costs something. He also watched her arrive in Bethlehem and be turned away from the guest room and offered the animal shelter, and he made a choice about how he was going to respond to that. He set it up. He made it as clean and safe as a man could make an animal shelter in an hour. He did what he could with what was available. It wasn't enough. It was everything he had. Step back now. The imperial decree that gave her no choice. The road she chose anyway. The 9 days of heat and cold and contractions on a track built for armies. The conversations with the baby she was carrying. The arrival in a full city in a borrowed room. The animal shelter at the end of the 90 miles. And through all of it, the same trust. The same yes she had spoken to Gabriel in Nazareth 9 months and 90 miles ago. The road did not break her. She had been built for something harder than a road. Here is the quiet truth. If you have ever had no choice but to keep going when stopping felt more honest, if you have ever been stripped down to the essentials by a journey that didn't care about your expectations, if you have ever arrived somewhere that looked nothing like what was promised and had to trust that the promise was still true, you are on this road with Mary. She didn't choose the census. She didn't choose the 90 miles. She didn't choose the animal shelter. She chose to keep walking every single day, all the way to the end. And the Son of God was born at the end of a road she didn't ask for, in conditions she didn't design, to a mother who had run out of everything except the one thing she needed most. If this changed how you picture that journey, share it with someone tonight. Subscribe if you want to keep walking through the stories no one tells you. Drop in the comments. What hit you hardest? The 90 miles? The contractions on the road? The animal shelter at the end? I read every one. See you in the next one.